Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Wild Ones National Webinar. I'm Sarah Ressing, the Education and Program Coordinator for Wild Ones, and tonight's presentation is Introduction to Matrix Design with Benjamin Vogt. But before I turn it over to our speaker, a few notes. This webinar is hosted on YouTube Live, so feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. If you'd like to hide the chat, enter full screen mode. Closed captioning is available in your settings, and you can pause or rewind using the controls at the bottom of the player. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more Wild Ones content. For those of you who are new to Wild Ones, we are a membership organization devoted to promoting native plants and natural landscapes through education, advocacy, and collaborative action. We carry out our mission through national education programs such as the Wild Ones Journal, Native Garden Designs, Seeds for Education grants, and webinars like this one. If you're not a Wild Ones member, we hope you will join us in helping native plants and natural landscapes thrive in every community. At the local level, Wild Ones chapters offer a knowledgeable, hands-on, and supportive community. Chapters programs include garden tours, speakers, conferences, as well as plant sales, exchanges, and seed collections. Local chapters are a great place to network with other nature enthusiasts and learn more about native plants. We're an inclusive community. Diverse voices and backgrounds make us stronger, and that's why we welcome everyone to join us. If there's not a chapter near you, please think about starting a Wild Ones seedling. Chapters form in a variety of ways, and what they all have in common is people like you who are passionate about the environment. Wild Ones provide support, guidance, and information, and our chapter liaisons are in the chat if you have questions, or you can fill out your information on our website. And finally, programs like tonight's webinar would not be possible without generous support of all of you. So please consider donating to Wild Ones today. Dwindling biodiversity is a threat to the foundation of life on Earth. In the last century alone, we've lost millions of acres of diverse ecosystems to urbanization. Wild One's vision is native plants and natural landscapes in every community, and your donation will help us reach that goal. Beyond donations, there's so many ways you can contribute to the Wild Ones mission. You can volunteer at the local or national level. You can certify your habitat, explore a range of branded items, or dive into the recommended reading list. Every action helps make a difference in creating a healthy planet. Visit wildones.org to learn more and get involved. And now I'd like to welcome our speaker. Benjamin Vogt is owner of Prairie Up, offering garden designs, online classes, workshops, webinars, and guidebooks. He's the author of A New Garden Ethics, Cultivating Defiant Compassion for an Uncertain Future, as well as Prairie Up, an Introduction to Natural Garden Design. While based in Nebraska, Benjamin works and speaks across the country on natural garden design and landscape ethics. Welcome, Benjamin.
Thank you so much. It is a great pleasure to be here with you guys. I have been a fan of Wild Ones for a long time, for sure. So it is always a pleasure to collaborate with national organization, local chapters. I've spoken at a lot of events for local chapters. So I wanted to let you guys know that earlier today I asked my cat what's 2 minus 2, and he said nothing. That's not why you're here. All right. I always have to start with a pun. This is what we're going to be looking at today. This is our table of contents. Matrix 101, benefits of matrix design, plant components design considerations, and we'll take a little brief look at the design I did for Wild Ones, and then we will really briefly discuss matrix management. All right, so let's dive in. Let's talk about matrix. Oh, wait, that's the wrong matrix. Sorry, that was like in 1999. Here we go. All right, what is a matrix? It is not a movie, all right, starring Keanu Reeves. Matrix is a design style that uses plant communities and plants that grow well together or that are evolved together naturally in their wild ecoregion ecosystem in the same site conditions, right? A matrix is densely planted in layers and resembles a wilder or natural landscape. Usually we see these in forest floors, prairies, meadows, savannas, lots of those good places. So I'm stealing a graphic from my friend's book, Planting in a Post-Wild World, because it perfectly illustrates what we're talking about with matrix design, as well as layers in a natural garden landscape, because when you go out to the wild, you see layers, right? So here we see there are 3 primary layers in a natural garden and a matrix garden. So we have the ground layer, which is commonly sedges, dominated by sedges and or grasses. And then we have something called seasonal theme layer, which is masses and drifts of flowers blooming in sequence throughout the growing season. So here where I am, southeast Nebraska, we're talking mid-April to late October-ish or so. And then finally, we have the architectural layer, which would be probably the layer where there's going to be the most with the least number of plants. I mean, so tall shrubs, small trees, tall perennials, plants like that. So a matrix can refer to you'll hear a lot of designers, architects, and throw the word matrix around, and then there's a couple ways to think about it. First is it can refer to the entire tightly knit landscape, the entire planting, or just the ground cover, base layer, or living green mulch. I use those terms all interchangeably all the time. When I think of matrix, I think of what is that base layer, that ground cover, that living green mulch, right? Is it one warm season bunch grass? Is it one sedge species? Is it three, four, five, six different species? But it's whatever that living green mulch is that replaces wood mulch. Because when you're out in the wild, you don't see wild animals broadcasting wood mulch anywhere. So we shouldn't do it either. Well, maybe once. We'll talk about that later. The dictionary definition, I have an English PhD, so I have to pull out dictionary definitions, but I think it helps. An environment or material in which something develops, a surrounding medium or structure, right? So that surrounding medium or structure is, again, that living green mulch, that base layer, grasses or sedges. It can also be a rectangular array of quantities or expressions or rows and columns that is treated as a single entity and manipulated according to particular rules. Woo, that's a definition for some of you are, one side of the brain, and number one's for people with the other side of the brain. But this is what a 50 square foot matrix garden would look like if you have a plan, okay? Each one of those green dots on there is the matrix layer, what I refer to as the matrix layer. So it's Butula gracilis, blue grama. That's every 12 inches across the landscape. And then we have sprinkled through masses and drifts of different forb species, different flower species, based on how they like to grow in the wild and how we hope they're going to establish and slowly spread and fully express themselves in the landscape as they move around by roots and seed. Matrix bases. Okay, yes, in a matrix design, plants are allowed to move around and totally fulfill their life processes or reproduce by fully expressing themselves, right? We don't want to say, plants are not on a shelf. They're not a sculpture. They're not a painting on a wall that never moves. We want the plants to move. We want the plants to show us where they want to be and how they want to be. That's like, I think, the whole part of having a natural garden, a natural landscape, is having the plants teach us. Plants are chosen in a matrix or natural garden primarily, or they should primarily be chosen for their compatibility to the site, but also especially their compatibility to one another, right? Because you don't want any one species to take over the entire planting palette, and then you're left with one species or maybe two or three if you're really lucky. And the focus in these natural matrix style gardens is not just on the growing season. It's also in the quote unquote off season, which for me is the sexiest part of these gardens. I am totally a fall and winter fan. Brown is a color too, right? These gardens have still so many ecosystem services in the winter as they capture and hold rainfall in their foliage to reduce urban flooding, especially when soils are frozen and runoff is going to be more likely to occur. And there's habitat and cover and snowstorms for wildlife. There's seeds for wildlife. There's so many ecosystem services. So our inspiration is the wild. It is nature, okay? Here is a very simple wild matrix. This was a sown landscape, and this is probably 10 years on afterwards. So it is a very simple landscape, I think, because the site is very harsh, very hot and dry and well drained. So only specific species are going to do well. Things like Dahlia purpurea, purple prairie clover. It's massing and drifting and sowing all around in a matrix, Butula gracilis, blue grama, and Butula curtipendula, cytodes grama. There might be a little bit of little blue stem in there as well too, but so it's a very simple, very easy matrix. This would look really awesome in our front yard, I think, right? Especially if you had to keep things really simple, really modern, and really clean. But there's not much weed pressure here, in large part because the site conditions are harsh. It's dry, it's well-drained soil, it's incredibly hot, so it's a lot tougher for weeds to get established here. Here's another wild matrix. This is more complex, more dense, and more layered in here. And this is just one snapshot in time in a growing season. You can see little blue stem in here with that copper, heath aster with the white flowers in there. I see a few goldenrod, probably stiff goldenrod, oligodendron rigidum in there, few last blooms. But I also see seed heads of things like Retivita pinnata, gray-headed coneflower. There's Rosa Arkansas in there, wild rose. I think no, there's some Zizia aurea in there, golden Alexander. So there's a lot of complexity in here, even if you can't see it right now in this fall image. But you can see how the plants are massing and drifting and self-organizing themselves. Again, this is a sown landscape. The plants are showing us how best they grow, how they want to grow. And they're all compatible because they have similar reproduction strategies and similar behavior, which is moderately, well, what should I say? I don't want to say aggressive. I always hate to say that plants are aggressive or behave because I think of my child as that. And I shouldn't even think of my child as that, right? Um, maybe more gregarious. That's the word I'm going to go with. So here's a design landscape worked on. Right now you see here just mountain mint, Pycnathemum virginianum, some purple poppy mallow, Calero and volucrata, in a matrix of Cytotes, grama, Bouteloua, curta, So very simple, kept pretty short so you can see over from the sidewalk to the building, so it's not that intimidating for people walking by. This one is actually a little bit more complex. It's on a very busy street corner. Lots of people walking by, lots of cars with thumping bass. Uh, but you can see again, this is just a snapshot in time. We have one cultivar in here, the New England aster species Purple Dome. Then we have Rudbeckia fulgida in there, some Eryngium yuccifolium, rattlesnake master there with the yucca type leaves, and then way on the left is Liatris ligula stylus, meadow blazing star. And there's a lot more in here too. There's even aromatic aster that has not started blooming yet. So when we start these landscapes, when you start your landscape, when you start a matrix, hopefully you're starting from here for two reasons. It's a lot easier and a lot simpler, and the less lawn we have, the better, right? If I ever run for president, that's pretty much just going to be my motto. Probably won't mean I'll win, but so here's where we start right here. We put down an initial 1 to maybe 2-inch mulch application, and that's just primarily to reduce weeds the first year, maybe first 2 year, and and primarily annual weeds that need sunlight. Their seeds need sunlight to germinate. So think crabgrasses, foxtails, mare's tail, species like that. Species that actually won't cause problems and won't harm our plants, even if they're allowed to grow in the landscape and aren't taken care of. This was actually just a year later, so doing very well. The matrix there is a combination of the two Boutelouas that I tend to use the most, Curtipendula Cytotes grama and Gracilis blue grama, which I've already mentioned 700 times today, right? This bed here is about 250, 300 square feet and has elements of traditional garden design to it. And the primary element is taller plants in the middle and the back. So it's got that traditional tiered effect to it, which is going to be pleasing for people who are trying to interpret the wilder type landscape and find some intention behind it and find some acceptance and be able to translate their feelings that, oh yes, this is purposeful, this is intentional. Somebody just didn't vomit out a bag of seeds and cross their fingers. And again, sexy time for me. Fall. I can't. We are actually recording this on the cusp of fall, and I'm so excited, even though it's in the 90s outside and I'm melting. So still a lot of shapeliness, still a lot of texture, still a lot of color as we move in the fall, and then we move later in the fall. Man, totally goth, right? We should put on black eyeliner and go crazy and have fun. Total front yard here. Client said we did not want lawn. I said, wow, marry me. We just went crazy. This was a landscape where the flowers or the forbs were put in by plugs, and then we sewed in a matrix of Schizochyrium scoparium, little blue stem, which has its pros and cons, and we will talk about this in a couple slides as well. I will just tell you right now, as a professional, as somebody who does this and has clients who are DIY managers, I will never, ever combine plugs with seeding again. But so, yeah, I'll get to it. That's your teaser, okay? That's your teaser. Matrix design, matrix landscapes, it is what nature does. You go out to any prairie, any meadow, any savanna, you will see that this is what's going on out there. Again, no squirrels, no bison, no cardinals are spreading wood mulch out there. So the predominant, yeah, again, that's the predominant matrix style, right? And these prairie meadow savanna ecosystems exist in every state in our country. And besides that, when you're thinking especially about converting from lawn to a more natural matrix style garden, a matrix garden, a prairie, a meadow, a savanna is an early succession type of landscape. And that's exactly what your lawn is. Your lawn represents a highly disturbed landscape where everything has just been totally messed up. Okay. There is very, very little nature there. It needs to be healed, which is why we spend so much money putting chemicals on lawns to keep weeds at bay, because nature keeps trying to heal itself. And we keep saying, nope, we're going to put down pre-emergent. We're not going to let anything else grow but lawn. So when we bring in these landscapes, we are healing. We are first and foremost healing the soil in an early succession landscape. And so even if you live like in Maine or something, right, and you have a lawn, um, you're going to put down a prairie as a early succession landscape, and eventually it's going to become probably forest or something, right? That's okay. The prairie garden is going to pave the way. It's going to heal the site. 10, 15 years later, you're going to have what is natural to your region. So, real quick, maps again, just to emphasize the point that just because I'm in Southeast Nebraska, you could be watching me from anywhere in the United States. And I just want to reinforce prairie, savanna, meadow, it's everywhere. It is in every one of our states, okay? And it is definitely in your lawn. I'm going to give you this next map is better for the southeastern United States. You can see all these different grasslands. The Hempstead Plains in on Long Island, right? That's prairie. There's very, very little of it left, of course, up there on Long Island, just as there's very, very little left anywhere in the country. So much of it is gone. Our tall grass is 99% gone. Southeastern grasslands, I think, are around 99% gone. So all right, the more plants you place in your landscape, in your garden, the sooner that space is going to fill in, right? I mean, yeah, right. This helps in site stabilization, weed suppression, as well as rebuilding food webs. You're going to be more in sync with nature and the plants because you're taking advantage of their natural habit and mutualisms as well, especially when you're doing layered, tight planting in a matrix style landscape. Matrix design is infinitely replicatable and can be even be inserted into established or tired or older beds that need some reviving. So think especially under woody plants, shrubs, trees, or even a daylily collection that you're just tired of mulching every year. Right, here's some spreaders. They're eventually going to spread. I mean, hopefully this person will actually just eventually take these spreaders out and put them in the compost heap. But eventually the spreaders are going to spread. But in the meantime, let's get some sedge underneath them. Carex albicans, white tinge sedge, Carex pennsylvanica, Pennsylvania sedge would be perfect under and around these. And you don't have to mulch again. And hopefully you'll have less weeding because the sedge are going to start to take over for us and cover the ground plane. So matrix design can be as simple or complex as you, the gardener, wants it to be. And that sort of depends on how much money you have, how much energy you have, how good your back is, but probably also a little bit on experience level, right? There's certainly bravery in this, but that's okay. I know you guys are all brave. A few forb species among a layer, one sedge, a grass species. That's really simple. That's really clean. That's a really great way to sort of dip your toes into the water of matrix design. That also means it can be less formal, contemporary. It can really suit a lot of design styles, a lot of design aesthetics. If design is one of your core issues, one of your core parameters in your landscape. All right, so here's another module, another matrix plan. This is 10 by 10 feet. I do not have all the little green circles representing grasses or sedges every 12 inches. I just have the forbs, the flower masses and drifts in here. But everywhere where it crisscrosses, imagine there's a grass or a sedge in there. Okay, so this is a 100-foot matrix plan. So you're like, oh, great, Benjamin. I have 6,000 square feet. This isn't going to help me. This is only 100 square feet. And I say, well, create a 100 square foot module and just repeat it across the landscape. Maybe you turn the module 90 degrees, 180 degrees, whatever, 270 degrees, and just repeat that module across the landscape. This makes it really easy for all the friends you trick to come over and help you and bribe them with beer and pizza, right? So you just have to repeat it across the landscape. All right, I teased this before. There are two main planting strategies, and they're both represented by the plan I did for you and Wild Ones. The first is plug all plant layers in the matrix, right? So that is literally the matrix, the ground cover, grasses and sedges, and then the flowers, and then trees and shrubs if you want to. So other option is just put in plugs, just put in potted plants for the forbs, the flowers, and then sow in the grass, the matrix. So the pros of plugging all or planting all the plant layers, all the plants at once means much, much faster establishment. The con is, yes, higher cost, much higher cost. Number two, when you are using plugs just for the flowers and then sowing in the grasses, the pros are definitely lower cost, right? The con is much slower and much more uneven establishment. I showed you many slides ago now, I think, front yard where we use Schizocaria and Scoparium, little blue stem as the matrix, and little blue stem took forever to get going on us. The fastest grass that I know of, warm season bunch grass that I've ever worked with, the fastest, what I mean by fast is going from seed to mature or semi-mature plant is going to be Bouteloua curtipendula, Cytots grama. That thing can grow really fast and give you good coverage, sometimes even in just one growing season. But little blue stem, it's going to take 2 years for sure. And in that time, you're going to have probably significant weed pressure because it just takes longer to get going and shade the ground and start to provide some competition for weeds in our landscape. Now, if you have a massive landscape, say, oh, I don't know, 2 acres at the University of Nebraska Medical Center at Omaha, Nebraska, you're probably going to seed it. You are not going to put plugs down across 2 acres unless you're Bill Gates or something, right? You're going to have it's going to be very expensive. So we're going to sow it. So this project, we sowed it in 2020. We are recording this in 2024. So it's 4 years. This picture is from earlier this year. So I'm actually surprised it looks this good after just 4 years. I would say usually seeding projects take 4 to 6 minimum to start to fill in and start to look good-ish, and then more like 10 before they're actually becoming dynamic and really doing a lot of cool things. Here's a project where we're mixing it up. Planting forb flower species, and then we're going to sow in Cytots grama. So there's the masses and drifts of the plugs laid out. There's the project a year later, or actually probably 2 years later. You can see the Cytots grama stems up there, and then Eryngium ucifolium, rattlesnake master there on the left. Know your Latin. You know, I'm giving you a lot of Latin today, and closed captioning always has fun with that, and I apologize for that. But Latin is the scientific binomial nomenclature is far more accurate because common names can vary by region. They can vary by people living next door. So you don't have to know how to pronounce it. Just have an idea of what it looks like, and everybody will know what you're talking about. Here's a landscape with Carex brevior used as a matrix plant. Which you should never use that plains oval sedge as a matrix plant because it gets tall and flops over and it's just a mess and smothers all the other plants. But this is early on. You can clearly see the matrix crosshatch in this early garden. They are not attractive when you're planting them, are they? Here we have the killed lawn, 1.5 inches of wood mulch on top. And then we come in and we put those plants in. We put those plugs in about every 12 inches or so. As a designer, I've definitely got my method down. I design on site. I don't use plans. I'm out there doing I'm just free forming it. And I've done all the research. I know the plant communities. I know what's going to go what's going to go with one another. I'm looking at sight lines on the site, but I will put out the flowers first, and I will put the architectural flower masses and drifts first. So the taller species, the echinaceas, Eryngiums, so rattlesnake master coneflowers, all those first I'll put out, and then I'll come in. I'll just sort of go down the list in height and sometimes in season. But yeah, if you want an internship with me, let me know. No, I'm not looking for an intern. All right, here's a site where we killed most of the lawn, cleansed some of it for pathways. Came in, we did our initial mulch application again, just to minimize some of the annual weed pressure, the crabgrasses and foxtails that we tend to see a lot of early on, and just help clients do management because they are DIY on management. Here's a shade garden. Yes, absolutely. You can do this in the shade. I do a lot of shade projects. I prefer shade projects because we tend to have less weed pressure and because it's a lot cooler for me doing the planting and layout. I'll be totally honest. I don't actually like gardening, guys. I know I shouldn't say that. I don't like the heat. I don't like the exhaustion. I don't like being dirty. There are pictures of me in my childhood squatting in mud. Okay, I did not want to put my knees in the mud. I'll put my knees in the mud now because I learned how to shower. But here's another shade garden. So this is a base layer of Carex albicans, white tinged sedge, and then just a bunch of different woodland and woodland edge species in here. And you don't have to have a large site either. It can be really small, really narrow. This is outside of an elementary school on the north side of a building. This is a shade garden next to vegetable beds. The vegetable beds are getting more sun than this thin strip along the windows on the north side. It's just Carex albicans, white tinged sedge, some wild columbine. I think there's some geranium in there, maybe zigzag goldenrod, solidago flexicollis, and that's it. I mean, this is literally like 18 inches, 2 feet deep, and that's it. And I think this looks really cool. I hope you do too. Get a tattoo of it. It looks that good. All right, so let's go through beginner and intermediate plant lists. So one of my favorite, I think right now my favorite grass to use in the matrix layer, and this is sunny landscapes. Budula gracilis, that's pictures there on the right. That's my favorite. It's 18 inches tall in bloom, maybe otherwise it's only 12 inches tall. So it gives us a nice ground cover. Now, if I wanted to kick it up a notch, I might bring in some more warm season bunch grasses. I want to kick it up another notch. I'll start to introduce some sedge, which are cool season grass-like species that are going to green up earlier in the season. Warm season bunch grasses are going to green up here, early to mid-May. Takes them a little longer to get going. Sedges will start greening up by early to mid-April. And they're going to be putting on that growth, so you'll start to get some of that weed competition with that new growth earlier in the season. You can also add in flowers in that ground cover matrix layer, right? Your matrix could just be all flowers if you wanted to. I think. I've never done it, but it makes sense that you could do that. Things like geranium maculatum, wild geranium, calero and volucrata, purple poppy mallow. I hate to pronounce this one. You're gonna fire me now. And Antennaria plantaginefolia, right? Pussy toes, one of the pussy toe species. You want to go advanced, you can start to think about bringing in spring ephemerals or seasonal bulbs, spring, summer, fall bulbs. So there's a lot you can do to really jazz it up once you start to feel confident with matrix design. Here's a health strip, a very wide health strip, that space between the sidewalk and the street that gets hot and nasty. It's probably never watered. If you live in the northern regions, it's going to get lots of snow and sand and salt on it in the winter. But right now, it just has Budalua gracilis in there, blue grama. If you want to keep it simple and clean, you can just put in some Echinacea pallida, right? Pale purple coneflower, maybe some aromatic asters, Symphyl oblongifolium. It doesn't take much to really make it pop, make it look a little bit cooler, and then provide more habitat, more benefit, especially for adult pollinators. And like with Echinacea, that's at least going to be a caterpillar host for you for some butterfly species. And again, yeah, you can keep it simple, just little blue stem and rattlesnake master. Great combination. The combination looks good. They play well together. They have the same sort of behavior. Yeah, that's a win right there. Again, you can do this in shade gardens. We're talking here in this shade garden, none of these plants probably gets over 2 feet tall. So you have a matrix. This was, I think I used 3 different species in this one. Carex albicans, white tinged sedge, Carex pennsylvanica, pen sedge, Carex springalii, Sprengel sedge. Maybe I put some Carex blanda in here too. I love Carex. I Carex about Carex, and I hope you care about Carex too. And then, yeah, just different wildflower species blooming throughout the season. There's mayapple there in the front, sort of an ephemeral, or goes early dormant, dormant early summer, midsummer, something like that. Turn the camera around, you can see it from that way too. Ooh, there's some Pachyaurea in there, golden groundsel as well. Awesome. And this is a very simple matrix, just carex, albicans, white tinged sedge with some geranium right here in this top front corner. So this probably doesn't get more than an hour of sun every day, if that. All right, so I'll probably go through this fast. You can just hit pause on the video if you want to. Again, it's better to start out simpler. So if I were starting out, I was brand new to natural garden design, using a matrix, trying to do what that incredibly good-looking bearded guy told you to do. This is a plant list I would start with, especially if you're in the southeast Nebraska area, middle of the country area. Okay, that's the plant list. That's all you have to do. All right, this is it. This is all you need starting out with. After a few years, you can start to add some more if you want to. You see some gaps, yeah, like physical gaps, holes in the landscape where there's still bare mulch, bare soil, as well as seasonal gaps, right? I need more spring flowers. I need more summer flowers. I need more fall flowers. You can start to bring those in. You can keep planting. It's a garden, right? You're supposed to keep gardening. I mean, you want to be out there, don't you? And you certainly want to be adding new plants. I know you do. I know you're sneaking them home when your significant other isn't looking. I know your trunk, it always has plants in it. Good for you. So again, in part, your aesthetic goals are going to dictate the forb to grass sedge ratio. However, so does the local ecological plant community. You might be replicating or drawing on. So if this was like a prairie out, like say we're converting in a cornfield to prairie, we'd probably have a seed mix, a plant mix, it would be 50-50 between flowers and grasses and sedges, okay? But I think in a more ornamental garden space, we should think more about 30-70. And I don't mean 30-70 necessarily as I have 100 square feet and 30 of the plants are grasses and 70 are flowers. I mean biomass. So, something like aromatic aster is going to get 3 feet wide, 2 feet tall. There's going to be a lot of leaf, a lot of stem on that plant. It's going to have a lot of biomass, so it's going to take up a lot of space. That's what I mean. So 70% of that. And if you have a good way of measuring biomass, let me know, right? There are scientists out there who do. I know them actually. Reasons you may want to go heavier on grass, however, maybe you need to stabilize your site, right? You have erosion problems, you have runoff issues, you have major weed competition. Well, you need something that's going to cover the ground and help to shade and smother it, right? Inversely, you want to increase soil moisture, right? You want to shade the soil so that moisture in the soil isn't evaporating as quickly in the heat of the sun. Maybe you want to decrease soil moisture, more plants, more grasses, more sedges with those fibrous root zones drinking up and soaking up all that water. Yeah, that's a good thing. And then, of course, habitat year-round cover. Maybe you need a living snow fence next to a driveway or something or a sidewalk. Um, Taller grass is perfect for that. Like taller, by taller, I mean like little blue stem. Don't okay, this is a good time to say this. If you have a smaller front yard, and I'm talking like anything under 20 acres, don't plant Indian grass, don't plant big blue stem. It gets so tall, it puts out so much seed, it will be nothing but an Indian grass or big blue stem monoculture within 5-10 years at most. Pretty plants, not good for smaller landscapes. So matching like with like is critical. So I'm glad I said that because this is a perfect segue. We want to match like with like in our landscape, and that means clumping species with clumping species or species that like to throw out a bunch of seed or a lot of root runners, plant them together. More gregarious species will sort of bump heads and keep each other in check a little bit more. If you plant a species that has a lot of root runners next to this, fragile little plant that just likes to clump and be there and never do anything, then who's going to win out? You probably don't want that, right? Especially if you spend a lot of money on things. And this is where sociability comes in. It's a way to rank plants based on their gregariousness, based on their behavior. Unfortunately, you will not see sociability ranking numbers anywhere on a plant tag. Not in any books except for mine. They're just not out there, and they should be. I would rather see this than almost anything else because this is the primary way you should be selecting plants. And we're just going to talk about it for a couple of slides today, even though it's like really, really important. You have to check out some of my online classes to get more in depth, I guess. So on the sociability ranking scale, level 1 plant, it stays put. It's a clumper. It's just a circle. Two, it's a light spreader in the immediate area, right? So it might create a very small colony. You might see a couple, a few extra happy plants here and there. Next year, a couple years later, that's it. Number three, we're going to see larger colonies, okay? You might have a lot more plants popping up in surprising places across the landscape. And then finally, level four, that's really gregarious. Plants that will practically create a near monoculture because that's their behavior. They like to take over. So obviously, you don't want to plant a four with a one. So how do you find out what is a 1, 2, 3, and a 4? You have to just do you just have to do a lot of research and a lot of observation as your plants start growing in your landscape. Eventually, you will find a baseline and figure this out. And it's really the only way, and I think it's really the best way to find out how these plants work well together. You have a smaller space, you need it to look neater, a little bit more controlled. Definitely stick with species that are going to be clumpers, aren't going to put out a bunch of seed, aren't going to run around a lot. If you have a larger landscape, maybe some weed pressures or backyard, your finances are tight, you need a lot of free plants, get plants that are going to put out a lot of seed, okay? And this brings us beautifully to the Wild Ones plans that I worked up for you guys. So we have a backyard and a front yard. The backyard's really simple, at least in my mind. We're just sowing in some grasses. Those blue circles are Symphyotrichum oblongifolium, aromatic aster. We're just dotting a ton of them around the landscape. They're going to bloom into early November practically anymore. It's just so warm anymore in these falls. Things are definitely changing. Those little red eyelashes are wild columbine, just a big drift of those plants. I think I said like 10 or 20 or something like that. And the yellow is Rudbeckia hirta, black-eyed Susan. Notice that all these species here are probably going to be around level 3 on sociability. It's a larger space. Go ahead, sow around, give us free plants. That's fantastic. I've matched you all together because of your behavior, because of your gregariousness. And then, but I want to focus in on the front yard. So I propose stages to this landscape. You can do it whatever way you want to. It's basically 3 stages. Foundation beds, the main larger lawn area out front here on the south side, and then the backyard on the north side. You can do them any way you want to. I suggest starting out with the foundation beds around the house to get a feel for matrix style design. And then, of course, that's also going to help you budget things out, because if you do the entire front yard at one go, which, you probably should, it's just fun. It's just dive in. My dad, when he goes in a swimming pool, he just goes in. Like, I'm like, my feet go in first, my toes go in first, then my feet, then my ankles, then my knees. It's like, I don't like to be shocked. He just dives in and likes the shock. So if you do the whole front yard, you're probably looking in the neighborhood of $7,000 retail plug price. That's going to freak out a lot of people. And that's just probably a high end too. Okay, guys, you can probably find better deals. So yeah, if you just do the foundation bed, it's going to help you start out. What else do I want to say about this? So everywhere the lines are crossing, that's going to be where you're going to put a Bouteloua gracilis. We're going to keep it very simple out here, very easy for you and for your neighbors, just Bouteloua gracilis being the matrix plant every 12 inches across the landscape, and that comes out to roughly 1,000. You might decide you only need 800 because some of these flower species are going to start to put out seed in the first year or two, but I'm always a fan of covering the ground as soon as possible. I don't like to save money. I like to get the ground covered because I also don't like to garden, remember. And part of gardening is paying attention to weeds and having weeds. And you're going to have weeds. Anytime you disturb a site, anytime you dig a hole, you're going to have weeds because you're creating disturbance. So I want to try and minimize that. And one of the ways I can minimize that is by having plants every 12 inches. Ideally, we'd actually have plants every 6 inches. And eventually you will get there as the plants grow up, but it's going to take 3 to 4 years, especially if you're working in a clay type soil. I would say pretty much any of these plants on this list here in this front yard are going to work in a wide variety of soils, including even, I would say, definitely clay, definitely loam, maybe a less soil, so it's got loamy sand. I would use a lot of these even in 100% beach sand. I did work on a beach sand project a couple of years ago that we could never build, unfortunately. I was so excited about it. But in sand, you have to install in spring and then water the entire summer so that you have enough roots for the plants to overwinter. So that's a different beast. So let's give you some examples of landscapes from colleagues, okay? Here's Adam Woodruff's backyard. Actually, he just sold his house, just moved back to Missouri. This was out in Massachusetts, but that was his backyard. You can see here, there's a lot of attention to design here in the sociability of the plants, also in the height of the plants, also in the color palette. So there's a lot going on here, too much, I think, for any of us to think about because Adam is really good at what he does. Here's an overhead view here. You can see the massing drifting. You can see how the plants are self-organizing. But still, this landscape is gardened. It is managed. There are plants being removed and there are plants being added depending on what the gardener wants to see. And sometimes we put a plant in and we're like, geez, I didn't know it was going to do that. I did all this research and wow, I can't believe it's doing that here. But my neighbor Bob down the street, it's acting a different way. Hey, that's how plants are, right? Every site is different. There's all these little microclimates in our landscapes. It's okay if plants are a little bit different. Here's a project by Fido Studio. This is really, it looks simple, but it's not. There's a lot of plants in here. Then again, this is just one snapshot in time. This is Monarda bradburyana, masses and drifts. So Bradbury's Monarda among a matrix of a whole bunch of different plant species. But if you're just driving by, you're not going to be overwhelmed by it because it's just one plant species blooming. So it's easy to digest, to accept, to interpret. And to accept, I think, overall, especially if you're someone who prefers or is used to lawns, right? Or daylilies with 3 feet of wood mulch between them. Here's my project, the Health Strip at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Plants are self-organizing. Again, this was a sowed landscape, so things were not specifically placed in specific spots for specific reasons. It was put out a bunch of seed and a lot of mega diversity, 200, 250 seeds per square foot, just to cover the ground as soon as possible, see what happens. And I think that looks pretty good there as the plants are self-organizing and figuring things out. Another project here. This is a very simple landscape plan. It's just Carex vapanoidea fox sedge on a slope with, I think we use less than 10 flower species. So it's basically 1 or 2 flowers every month was blooming, and that's it. The clients wanted it simple, but they also wanted it covered, especially with that grass or sedge on the landscape. So here's another angle there. So that's Coreopsis lanceolata blooming there, yellow. And then behind it, I think we use Penstemon hirsutus, which is a little bit of a cheat. It's not quite native here. So, I'm fired again. That's 2 today. Here's front yard at headquarters, matrix, you can see. So this is, let's see, late May-ish, maybe, I would say, late May, early June. So there's definitely need to add some flowers here for some color and pollinator support. But you can see here the matrix of the grasses and then all the different shapes, all the different textures of the plants. That's the cool thing about using a lot of different species. There's still a lot of sculptural elements going on to this landscape that we can appreciate as designers of a garden, right? There it is in early-ish fall. So how do you show, so I've talked about this a lot today already, but how do you show cohesion and purpose to both humans and wildlife? Because I know a lot of you are going to live in HOAs, you're going to have neighbors who are going to call the Gestapo, weed control on you, because it's not about you, it's about them. So you can go to my website and I have a nice little heart-to-heart with you there on one of the pages. But how do we show intention? Simple, clean matrix, ground cover layer. Let's just use one plant species. All right, Bouteloua gracilis. Let's do it in sun landscapes. Mass and drift forbs. Mass and drift, right? 5 echinacea here, 5 echinacea there, 5 echinacea over there, repeating those masses across the landscape so people can connect the dots, read the landscape, see how it makes sense. Something always in bloom, but no more than 3 or 4 species in bloom at one time so it doesn't overwhelm people trying to read and interpret the landscape. And by the way, when you're doing these very basic design concepts, you are not losing ecosystem function, you are not losing wildlife support, you're just meeting people a little little bit more towards the middle, which we all need to do if we want to see our culture, our society transition away from high maintenance lawns that are soaking up water and having chemicals spew all into our rivers and all to our drinking water. Clear walking paths is another good strategy to have. Clear access points. I'm a fan of 4 and 5 and 6 foot wide paths going through landscapes if you have the room to do it. Benches, tables, sculptures, cues to care, right? Google that term. You'll learn a lot about it. In front yard landscapes, I try to keep plants around 3 feet tall or less. Most of the plants I prefer to keep around 2 feet tall. Again, this is so people can see over the landscape. They're not going to be worried that a velociraptor is going to jump out. You know, I just learned that velociraptors are really small. You watch Jurassic Park and they're actually quite big, but it turns out they're really small. They're like cat size. So, I mean, they'd still hurt if they bit you. So we want people to be able to see them coming through the landscape just in case, right? All right, couple slides on management and then we are done. If you dictate terms, which is traditional gardening, right? This is what I want. The garden will never show you what it needs, let alone stabilize the site or become climate resilient and sustainable and all the stuff we want these natural landscapes to do. The number one mistake in gardening with a too heavy hand early on is to garden with a too heavy hand early on before you get a chance to learn how the plants grow and reproduce, compete, and fade away. And it's okay if plants die. Okay, guys, it doesn't mean you have a black thumb, doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. You know, it's the same, it's just the same among us, right? Some of us just live longer than others. Some of us do well in one environment and don't do well in another environment. That's okay. Management, again, starts with proper plant selection for the site. That doesn't just mean thinking about sunlight, soil, drainage. It also, again, means about sociability, right? You save yourself a little bit of time and effort, I believe, when you choose plants that evolve together in your ecoregion. So study the plants in wild areas around you. Study the books, the naturalist books, the flower books for your region, for your state, and see what grows together out in the wild and use some of those plant species together in your landscape if it has a similar growing conditions, okay? And here's a quick handy chart. Again, you can pause this later on when you're watching a recording of the video over and over and over and over and over because it's that good, isn't it? So green dots means that's what you should be doing at that time, generally, right? Every landscape is going to be different. Every landscape requires nuanced management. This is just a basic guideline. We cut down our landscapes when soil temperatures hit 50 degrees. It's not air temperatures, it's soil temperatures because soil temperatures are when roots, plants start becoming active, when some bee species start waking up. Obviously, there are bee species that wake up and do their thing throughout the entire growing season. Maybe you don't mow down or cut down your entire landscape, maybe just part of it. And then next year you switch it up and you do the other part and you leave the one part standing. So it's up to you how you do it. And remember, again, sexy in the winter. Look at that hoarfrost. Awesome, isn't it? This is why you leave your plant standing. It has nothing to do about ecosystem services. It's just pretty. No, it has everything to do with all the other stuff too. In fall, again, I cannot wait till everything dies. Oh, it doesn't die, it goes dormant. But brown is a color too. Remember that. There you go. I'll leave you with a meme. All right. Thank you so much, guys. I know we have some questions here to get to. Thank you for joining me. Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. There is so much to digest here, and we had a couple questions come in from our registrants, so I will go through those right now. So our first question is from Marilyn, and she asks about your stance on assisted migration.
Yeah, great question, Marilyn. I disagree with a lot of people in horticulture about this one. I'm not in general. I mean, there are always caveats, there are always variables, there are always circumstances. In general, I'm not a fan of assisted migration. We've already done so much that we didn't know what the results were going to be, and it turns out the results were really negative. So I'm for planting species that are native here now and letting them figure it out. Also, the wildlife are still here using those native species for host plants, for seed, however they use them. And for those wildlife to have a chance to adapt. they're going to need those species. Okay, they're not going to need species from Texas and Nebraska. They're going to need Nebraska species. But the cold hard truth is most of the fauna, most of the wildlife are not going to be able to adapt in our changing climate.
Oh, Kate asks, what is your experience in planting directly into turf that hasn't been killed or removed?
Yeah, let's see, what's Larry Wiener's daughter's name? She's experimenting right now with this in her front yard, I think. And it was a pretty thick lawn. My experience with this is it's much more effective if your lawn is already stressed, right? There's gaps, it goes some are dormant. You're having maybe some runoff issues or something like that. It's a lot easier to seed and plant into it if there's still 50%, 60% green growth in that lawn. Of course, it's also going to depend on what your turf species is. Here in southeast Nebraska, it's primarily tall fescue. Really easy to deal with, not like zoysia or something like that that's really high up there on the sociability scale and it might cause some issues for us down the road. So it's going to depend on where you are, what your grass species, what your lawn species already is. But I would tell you most of our lawns are fescue and we seed and plant into them sometimes, but almost always after they have been killed. So yeah, it again, a lot of variables. There's always variables, guys, but that's a good question, Kate.
So Barb asks next if her prairie plants are falling over, should she thin them out or plant grasses in between them?
Hmm. Again, there's variables here. It's like what species, what species of prairie forbs are there? One of the biggest reasons, well, there's two reasons, but I think the bigger one for forbs that are flopping over, it's not that they don't have buttresses around them, right? These plants, these are our gardens are not cathedrals. I wish they were, but they're not. It's not that they don't have buttresses around them supporting them. It's that there's not enough root competition. One of my favorite plants to discuss is stiff goldenrod, Oligoneuron rigidum. You go out to a prairie here in southeast Nebraska, it's maybe 2 feet tall. You put it in any garden setting. I've used it in a lot of gardens, and I shouldn't have. It'll get 4 to 6 feet tall. And the reason it's getting so tall compared to a wild prairie is because it has way less root competition. It's like, oh yeah, this is awesome. There's only like 10 plants around me. Out in a prairie, I have to deal with 50 years or 100 in a square yard. So a lot of competition for resources. So in a garden, it's going to grow. It's going to grow way too tall. It's going to be way too top heavy. And it's going to flop over. So the answer to so many of our problems is that you just need more plants. That's a win-win for everybody.
Fully agree there. Perfect. Our last question is from Jennifer. She asks if there are situations where you would plant a matrix without using grasses or sedges.
Yeah, the benefit of grasses and sedges is just the cover for wildlife. The weed competition, site stabilization, keeping soil moisture there a little bit longer. And if and it just looks more like a prairie and a meadow. It's also going to help you out in the winter because so many of our forb species or flower species, they drop and lose their leaves just like trees do. So then you have more bare soil exposed to snow or rainwater and runoff. So if we have grasses on there, we're better able to stabilize the site, slow erosion, stop any issues like that. So I mean, you could, if your density is really good, you could just put in a ton of geranium, a ton of purple poppy mallow, a ton of pussy toes, a bunch of different species. But I would really urge you to diversify your species because that's going to be really beneficial for climate change. If we have any sort of disturbance move through that kills, I don't know, one species of flower, one core species of flower, it's good to have diversity in there. And grasses and sedges are going to do that for us. You don't have to use a lot of them, but put some in there. Help the ecosystem out.
Thank you again, Benjamin, for joining us. So we hope everyone has enjoyed Matrix Landscape Design, and we extend our gratitude to our speaker and wish everyone the best. Have a great day.